I will call the meeting to order at 6:03. Our first order of business is school board reorganization. Before we move to that, we do have a new member of our SU board. So I think it would be great if we could start with introductions. You maybe know everybody, but let's do it anyway.
Okay.
So you want to start?
Sure. Miranda Johnson on the NB board for Sheldon.
Ferg Gilmore, Director of Facilities.
Akua Smith on the Enosburg Richford board.
Mary Niles on the SU and NMB board, and I live in Montgomery.
Jamie McAllister, Director of Human Resources.
Don Reed, Director of Food Services.
Dominic Trojan, Director of Technology.
Michelle Virgin, the Director of Student Services. Heather Moore, Director of Leagues After School and Summer Programs.
Melissa Wood, Early Ed Director.
Morgan Davis, CFO.
Courtney Fletcher, Administrative Assistant to Lakota, and the Communications Coordinator for the district.
Michelle Irish, Director for Education Quality.
Gabrielle Miller, Director of Instruction and Learning.
Lynn Coda, Superintendent, and we have Sarah online. Sarah, can you introduce yourself?
I'm Sarah Herdevies, and I'm on the ER and the SU board. Welcome.
Thank you. So next order of business is to nominate a board chair. So we'll look for a nomination for chair.
I nominate Mary Niles.
Any other nominations? Hearing none, by roll, Sarah,
Aye.
Miranda,
Aye.
Akua,
Aye.
and Mary.
Aye,
I
thank
should
you.
have asked, I assumed that you were okay with that.
I am, I appreciate it, thank you so much.
I'm gonna, at this point, turn the meeting over to you, Mary.
Okay, bravo, thank you so much. So, continuing with the board reorganization, up next is our vice chair. Mort is currently serving in that capacity. I don't know if anyone has spoken with him about his interest in continuing in that capacity.
I have not, but he has also not expressed any interest in not continuing.
Okay, well, I'll open it up to nominations then.
I'll nominate Mark.
Okay, great, thank you, Akua. We'll do that by roll. Sarah?
Aye.
Miranda?
Aye.
Akua?
Aye.
And Mary is an aye. Our clerk, I believe, is Akua, correct, right?
It was Zach.
Oh, no.
Oh, really?
I thought it was me. Was
I
that?
thought it was you.
That's what I had.
That was ER
Oh,
before. Interest in taking on that role, Akua, or would you prefer someone else?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, all right, so I'll nominate Akua then for clerk. We'll do that by roll. Sarah?
Aye.
Miranda?
Aye.
Akua?
Aye.
And Mary is an aye. So under finance, we have our motion to approve warrants electronically, which seems to be working well, requiring 2 people to approve the warrants that get emailed. Any concerns or discussion about changing that policy or practice? All right, so I'll make a motion to continue to approve warrants electronically with 2 board approvals. We'll do that by roll. Sarah?
Aye.
Miranda?
Aye.
Akua?
Aye.
And Mary is an aye. The SU voting delegate for statewide health insurance, I think I am that person, right?
Was it Mary last year?
At the conference in the fall, right?
I think so.
Yeah, which is fine, I don't mind doing that again.
Well, the conference in the fall is the Beehive Isbet
Right,
delegate. Is this one different, Morgan? Is this
I think
one?
this one is different. And I wonder, is there any delegate to the board that you're on for the statewide negotiating? I wonder if it's,
I don't think so.
It's So this one is slightly different, so this only comes up in the year that they're negotiating, which is that next year?
Yeah,
It is next year,
I
so
thought so.
I think that there is something, this is a relatively new process statewide, and what I remember is that we needed to have a voting delegate as part of that process, so I can't articulate well what that is.
Okay,
But it is separate.
so this
from
is
what we
different
asked for
from the
in fall.
VISBIT and VHI
Correct.
piece, gotcha, okay,
This has to do with the statewide healthcare bargaining.
okay. Is anyone feeling a pull to that position?
Are you checking Morgan to see if it?
I am not, but I don't know who I would check with.
Okay.
Sue,
Yeah.
let's come back to that one.
Yeah.
We'll get some clarity because.
Of what it
may-
entails, yeah, it would be helpful to know what it entails, is it low commitment, is it high commitment?
It was relatively low commitment when
Yeah.
it happened. I believe that, I want to say this had to do with, was this a ratification piece? Morgan, does that sound familiar?
I would assume so, tied to the statewide bargaining.
Yeah, it's definitely not part of the bargaining team, but there was every SU was expected to have a delegate. So, and it may be not an issue
Okay.
anymore, so we'll.
All right, well, let us know. So the regular meeting schedule, which is the third Wednesday of each month at 6 o'clock. Here at central office, does that continue to work for everyone? Okay, we don't need a motion on that, eh?
Just direction, is it still, we have historically not met in February and March unless there was a need.
Right,
And we've also not met in May or June, and then we take it back up in August. But we can
well, we don't meet in
always-
July
We
either.
don't meet in July.
Yeah.
So we can always have a special meeting if something comes
course.
up, but those are not, most of the more challenging SU work happens as you build up to budget.
Right. Yep, I think that sounds fine. All right, we're gonna skip over the annual board retreat dates for now, and Courtney is going to send out a doodle around that. It's gonna be more effective for seeing what'll work for everyone.
And to confirm that is, if there's ever a ratification vote for the statewide health insurance agreement, and it was you last year.
Are you looking at me or at Cliff?
I'm looking at you, Mary.
Oh, okay. Okay, well, that's fine. I mean, I don't mind doing it again, so it doesn't sound like it's a particularly big commitment. Do we need a motion on that? Or is there anyone else who would like to take that on? I'm happy to pass the torch.
I don't mind taking it on Mary, but.
Okay, yeah, that,
If you wanna do it.
no, please. I mean, that is in your wheelhouse and absolutely. So you feel, all right, so I'll nominate Akua for the SU voting delegate for statewide health insurance. And we'll do that by roll. Sarah?
Aye.
Miranda?
Aye.
Akua?
Aye.
And Mary is an aye. Great. Awesome. Okay, Courtney, do you want to remind everyone where the current locations are for posting our meeting agendas?
Sure, for the FNESU board, it's each of the 6 town clerks and the libraries, not libraries, the schools. So each school and all of, for SU, and then I posted on our website as well.
And does everyone feel like that's largely effective for reaching the people we want to reach? Are there has anyone received any suggestions of other locations or anything we might want to tweak around that? Okay, all right, so we'll just kind of keep that as is then. As far as the Robert's Rules of Order, we use the Robert's Rules for small boards. Lynn, do we need a motion on this, or it's,
I think that you could say yes. We can have a
Okay.
motion for that.
do you want to explain a little
So
bit?
the big difference is you can either follow Robert's rules or Robert's rules for small boards, and you are a small board. It is a little less formal in the small boards, where the chair actually votes in a traditional Robert's rules protocol, the chair would not vote, they would break a tie. So there's not really anything that hasn't worked for us in terms of using the small board rules. So I would recommend that you stick with the Robert's rules for small boards.
Yeah. Great, I agree, so I'll make that motion that we'll operate by Robert's rules for small boards. We'll do that by roll. Sarah?
Aye.
Miranda?
Aye.
Akua?
Aye.
Mary's an aye. Lynn, do you wanna, speak to the next two?
Yeah, I actually am going to recommend that we just went over this when we reorganized into
Right.
local boards in March. So just to be transparent for anyone who's watching, each year all board members go over the code of ethics for Vermont school board members that the Vermont School Boards Association has authored. And we also go over our FNESU board member conflict of interest. I don't feel it's necessary to make you sign those documents twice. We've just gone over it. If does anybody have an objection to just knowing that I have all the documentation from when you did it in the local boards?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Seems fine. The official media for publishing meetings.
So we would use the Messenger if we needed to. That's really the only local paper that we have.
Great. The board communication spokesperson, do you wanna speak a little around that, Lynn?
So one of the things that it is important to just remember is that when you are together as a board is when you can make a decision about statements from the board. Outside of that, I typically serve as the spokesperson in consultation with the board chairs in almost every circumstance, especially if it has to do with something that is board specific. So you've all experienced a time or two, if you've been on the board for a while, things will happen and there may be media that tries to get to you. And you also, as a private citizen, you sometimes might find your way to the legislature or something like that, and it isn't really the media, but it is you and it is being recorded. Just a reminder that none of you can speak on behalf of the board without the board. So you're a private citizen outside of that. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Thanks, Lynn. So the policies, we have the public comment and handling complaints for the FNESU policies.
We also went over those I didn't have that pulled up. We went over those when we met in March. Do you want me to review those again?
I don't think it's necessary.
Okay. Just to speak at a high level, the public comment piece is the board has a policy on how you receive public comment, where it really is not intended to be a back and forth with the public. It's an opportunity for the public to be heard on matters. And there is a point of order that the board chair will set and establish when there are members of the public here to comment. Handling complaints, sometimes as board members, we don't need to go into the policy, but high level on that is that there's a kind of a chain going to the source first and working their way up. So some people are tempted to go straight to board members, and it's important to encourage them to go back to the beginning and make sure that they've talked to the source and the principal and then the superintendent, and then it rises to the board level. But again, when you're on your own and receiving that, you can't act as the board. So back to the policy on that, and if there are complaints about the superintendent, it would go to the board chair.
The board development plan.
So that is part of what we do. I think we missed one of our board retreats. That is one element of the board development plan. There are also many elements, many opportunities available to boards around professional learning that you get regularly from the Vermont School Boards Association. Some of those are in-person opportunities, conferences. There is one every October. Mary Akua has gone to several of those. There's a requirement for board chairs and superintendents to have some of those trainings together, 8 hours a year we have to accomplish. There are also synchronous and asynchronous online trainings from the VSBA, and I think it's very good information, and I encourage people to participate in that. There's also, for new board members, there's also helpful information through the VSBA, and I think we have just ordered, if I remember right, new manuals. Maybe I didn't ask you to do that part. I think I might have done that one on my own. I'll double check. But new VSBA manuals that existing board members already had. So we've got those for our couple of new members.
Oh, sorry. I was trying to think for a minute. Yes.
We ordered them, right?
We, they automatically send them out.
Oh, okay.
When I asked, they were waiting to get everybody's information.
Okay,
So yes, they will get it.
thank you.
Great, thanks, Lynn. Do you want to speak to the advocacy
Sure.
piece?
So, the VSBA also does a really great job of sending out regular legislative updates to all board members, and some of us as leaders are also on their distribution list. So I encourage you, especially in a year like this year, when so many really important decisions are being made around the future of public education in our state, to really stay engaged and read those as they come through your inbox, and feel free to engage with your legislators as private citizens. As a board, you also could choose to provide testimony or make a statement. You need to come together as a board to do that. So I think that Morgan and I try to give legislative updates every time we meet, and we'll have a little bit of a briefer one this time, but we will have a legislative update for all of you. So we typically take the lead on that, and encourage you to stay up to date as well.
Great, thanks, Lynn. Okay, so that completes our reorganization. Moving on to the consent agenda. We have our prior minutes from January 15th, as well as the minutes from the special meeting on the 20th of January, and a number of first read policies. Any discussion, questions, concerns? Okay, so I'll make a motion then to accept the consent agenda. We'll do that by roll. Sarah?
Aye.
Miranda?
Aye.
Akua?
Aye.
And Mary's an aye. Lynn, do you have any need to reprioritize the flow of the meeting tonight?
I have one executive session piece that I would just ask to move to the end so that we can let the rest of the people leave the meeting.
Absolutely. Okay, great. Okay, so that brings us to our visitors and public comment. I see Erin in our virtual space. Anyone, and is there, that's it, who I see on the screen? Or Erin, you're interested in public comment?
Yes, please.
Okay, of course, yeah. Please, the floor is yours.
So my question comes to you as a community member, and it's mostly because I'm kind of just ignorant on the way things work, and I'm just looking for some clarification. So you have a line item in this year's fiscal budget called legal, and you budgeted $30,000. And so currently you've spent $7,473 on attorney's fees to negotiate your teacher and support staff contracts. And after this week, we had a couple meetings, and you get April's billables and invoiced. Like that number will probably likely go up to about 10,000. And neither the support staff or the teachers have reached a settlement yet. And I fully recognize that it is your right to bring anybody you want to the negotiating table. But I'm just curious, and I'd like to know whose decision it is to hire the attorney. Does the superintendent make that decision? Does the negotiating committee? And why I'm asking, I think this is important. Why I'm asking is that this district is one of the lowest per pupil costs in the state, and that status has in part been accomplished by school board members such as yourselves, like negotiating with your staff. And so I'm I'm curious. I'd like to know why it is you found the need to spend $10,000 on a job that you were perfectly capable of doing yourselves. So how do you justify this expense to taxpayers? And I have other questions like, what happens if you actually get sued and you need that money? Or if you have this surplus in this of extra money in this legal budget each year, are you grossly over budgeting for legal services? And I know that you just didn't like waste money to hire an attorney to bully your employees. I know you didn't do that because that would just be really weird, right? But maybe you have a pragmatic decision. So like maybe you're anticipating some sort of ROI, like a return on investment. So I'd like to know how much you anticipate saving by not paying in wages. And I'm sure you discussed this. So like, could you share with the community how much you will be saving due to your investment in this attorney? And just to recap, I want to know who decided to spend this money? How do you justify the expense to the community? Are you over budgeting? And what's your anticipated ROI? And thank you for your time.
So there are a lot of questions in what Aaron gave you during the public comment part. So I don't know if this is an information request more than a comment.
Right. Well, I mean, I feel as though we can work on a response to that. I don't know that I can answer all of your questions in this moment, Aaron. But I certainly appreciate your concerns. I understand where you're coming from, and we can absolutely, speak to that. I don't know, typically, as we just said, like public comment doesn't tend to be a kind of back and forth with people because one, I need to verify the numbers. I haven't been able to do that. I'd like to try to kind of more thoughtfully, think about your questions and your concerns. I don't, hearing the word bully being used is, concerning because that's certainly never the intention of us during these negotiations, to have someone act as a foil for us in order to bully people.
I didn't think that was your case. Like, I'm just saying, I would like to know more.
Yeah, well, I certainly understand, and I'm happy to work with Lynn and Morgan to kind of respond, in a thoughtful way. It's a little hard to do that immediately on the spot.
That's fine. Would you like me to submit this in writing?
Yeah, why don't you do that? Why don't you send an email to me and CC Lynn and Morgan?
Okay.
And we'll pick up the conversation that way and hopefully be able to, provide you with the kind of answers that you're seeking.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Okay. So that brings us to our spotlight with Gav and Leah.
So I should not put Leah on there.
Oh,
Sorry.
apologies.
Gavin's gonna forget this.
Well,
problem.
Leah has a hand in this. because
Of course.
She's really the one doing most of the analysis, so. All is fine.
You're gonna be presenting.
I will present, and if questions come up that I can't answer, we'll parking lot them and get back to you all. So Leah's been working very hard on triangulating our data, especially around literacy and K-5 literacy, because we've been implementing a new program this year. So year one of my view, and she's been trying to look at the written curriculum, how it's being implemented, how it's being tested, and then what are the outcomes. So that is sort of the basis of this presentation. I can't see that, so I have to look at my screen. Apologies. So here's sort of a visual of what we just talked about. curriculum that's what's learned, what's tested, what's taught, and then what's written. And the written is sort of the foundation. And so we are implementing MyView this year for the first year, K-5. And all of this data is just K-5, so no 6-8 data yet. This curriculum really focuses on foundational literacy skills in kindergarten, letter recognition, phonemic awareness, basic sight word vocabulary. In first grade, it builds with more phonics and comprehension and vocabulary, and then in second grade, that further advances, focusing on fluency, text analysis, writing skills across different genres. And as you have this in the board notes, you can click on these links here to go deeper if you'd like. So these are the priority standards down here. And then this is kind of an overview of the MyView program. So K-5, they all have the same themes in each unit. So unit 1 is social studies and exploration for kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade. So all grades have sort of the same flow over time, and then it increases in complexity. And again, more links down here if you want to see a really detailed view of the pacing guides and what happens at each level. And so the assessments that we're going to look at tonight are both ongoing classroom assessments and the common assessments that everybody in the district is using that are a little bit more formal. So STAR and MyView both have assessments in our common assessment plan. Again, you can click on here and see really dig in if you want to see the full assessment plan. We're going to look pretty closely at some data around letter sound identification, sight word recognition, the MyView assessments, and the STAR assessments. So those are the main pieces of the data. In this first chart, you're just seeing kindergarten, and if you look on the bottom left, you can see the sight word assessment down there, and then the MyView assessment and the STAR early literacy assessment, and we're looking at fall to winter. So in this particular view, we're seeing growth in the sight words, and the numbers are the percentage of students proficient. So in the fall, kindergartners came in 2% proficient, and now we have 25% of our students proficient. So that's kind of what those numbers show. So we're seeing growth. One thing that I think is consistently present in all of this data that is a source of exploration is that we're not seeing a lot of consistency between the assessments. So we're seeing growth, but we're not necessarily seeing the same growth over the different assessment areas. So that's just something to note. It's something that Leah's digging into to try to figure out what's that about. Is that about implementation? Is it about something else?
What's it about alignment of the measures as well?
Yeah.
So you said, I just want to clarify to make sure people are understanding this. So you said 2% were proficient with sight words coming in, we're at 25 now.
Yeah.
MyView, those are the assessments that they're taking as part of their curriculum as they're going through. They started with 30%.
Their benchmark assessments, so like more formal type, but yes, within MyView.
And now they've grown to 69%.
Correct.
And then STAR early literacy has grown to 75%.
Yes.
I just didn't want the last word to be 25%.
Yes.
That's
yes.
one measure.
Yep.
Make sure we said that out loud.
Yeah, that's just sight words.
Yeah.
And one note about the sight words is that the expectation, in my view, for sight word, we went from, I think last year was 25 words by the end of kindergarten, and now we're at I think it's 90. So the rigor and the expectation for within this program is substantially greater than it was previously. And then down here we have letter names and sounds. This is pretty consistent, and we're at 80%, so it's looking pretty good. And here's first and second grade growth. First grade, and I think this came out in the annual report as well, that it's a little bit difficult to read this data because there are two STAR tests. One is early literacy and one is reading. And one thing that we realized is that because the STAR early reading is accessible to grades K through 3, some kids took the early literacy STAR assessment in the fall, but then grew enough to be able to take the STAR reading in the winter. And so it looks as if they're going down, but we're actually not positive. Do you see what I'm saying? They're different tests. So that's something that we're going to fix in the assessment plan for next year. All first graders are just going to take the early literacy from one to the next so that we can look at apples to apples. So I think one of the reasons that we're looking at this data now is for those types of things. Are there issues with implementation? Are there issues with the assessment plan? Are there issues with professional development that we need to address? All of those things, this data can kind of help us get at that. So in the left-hand chart, we're looking at the MyView beginning of the year compared to the MyView mid-year. That assessment didn't change, so that's also showing some decrease, which is another something to look into. We're seeing consistency over the sight words, and then that anomaly on the right-hand side with the STAR early literacy and the STAR reading. And then grade 2 is showing growth in all the areas. This was a strong grade level that came out. Any questions or things? Here's another visual, 3rd grade. MyView mid-year assessment on the left-hand side. So that's 30%, and then the STAR reading is 88% proficient. So you can see there's increase in both. So the MyView assessment in 3rd grade increased from 5% proficient at the beginning of the year to 30%. And same thing with STAR reading, 68 to 88. But there's not alignment between the 88 and 30. So that's something we're digging into. Same kids, yes. Yeah. And growth in both areas. But not consistent numbers between proficiency for those, so.
Why do you think there's such a big discrepancy there?
We don't know. It's the kind of thing though that makes you wonder, is there something going on with the curriculum-based measure that we're using there, right? The benchmark assessment in the program. Is it an instructional issue? Is it because they're implementing a new program?
But they're getting better outcomes for the kids in the STAR reading.
Correct.
My wonder would be about what you wonder about is, can your curriculum measure be a predictive measure for how they'll do on the STAR assessment? And right now you're not seeing that reliability between the two assessments, which we have known about MyView from the beginning, is that it is so much more rigorous than our previous program. So it makes me wonder about where the MyView benchmark is set and how much higher is that than what the benchmark is set in STAR. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes.
All things to dig into, the why about it. Same, fourth grade, kind of same picture here. There's improvement from 9% to 17 and from 46 to 55, but then there's inconsistency between those. And, you know, in year one of implementing a new program, I don't think it's unusual to see this. But it's just, you know, something to dig into. And then we've got the fifth grade results. Ooh, I think she changed this picture on me. Fifth grade is also inconsistent, and the MyView assessment went down, so that's something to dig into. We had some growth in the star reading, but yeah, that's the grade. And then the last one is.
So it's interesting that, and this is the first year that you have this, you don't have like this fifth grade year, we don't have their fourth grade year to compare to, or do we?
Not in the same assessment.
Not in the same assessment, okay.
No, well, we could look at
Yeah,
star, yeah.
Right, so there are other data points, I mean, because even the 5% is concerning, right? So for the
Yeah.
prior year data, is there anything that you were able to extrapolate or glean in terms of why they're so low?
I don't think yet. I think Leah has pulled this data together and now is sort of figuring out, okay, what are the other pieces of information we need to look at in planning for next year and in digging into why we're getting some of these strange gaps.
And the 5% piece, we wouldn't have anything to compare that to, but we would the 44%. So that discrepancy between the two, we would only have comparable data for the star, which is the 44%. So
Right.
that could be a next step.
Yes.
Certainly.
These are all for next steps, right? They're all for assessing, like, how's it going? You know, what's going well, what needs attention, and yeah, I mean, that's how we're using this data.
And one other question around the fifth graders, right, is I would assume there's some concern considering the fact that they're going to now graduate to middle school, right? And so, any thoughts on what the plan is to follow them into, you know, that environment based on the data that we have here?
I mean, that's something we can look into, I don't have anything specifically. They're going into another pretty strong reading program, but we haven't assessed sort of what's going on with that reading program either, yet. So those are things to dig into. It's actually not that, if you look at the data over time, it kind of goes down. Engagement goes down as the kids it's better at the kindergarten level, and then kind of like deteriorates. I don't think it's not unusual, it's concerning, but it's not unusual to see as the kids get older, engagement kind of goes down and scores go down. And so I think we'll want to dig into that.
It is interesting though, because there's a lot of things that we could do. This is the starting place with just this intentional analysis of MyView as we're planning forward for how to support that curriculum and those teachers for next year, getting into that with the middle school piece too. So it'll be an interesting thing to follow over time, you know, where our fourth graders entered, this year's fifth grade, where they entered after fourth grade, and what that will look like when they start taking, I always forget the name, it's Amplify. I don't know why that will not stick, but Amplify, when they do their fall measures, it'll be really interesting, I think, to see where do they enter on that score, because that'll be another data point that tells us just, is this more proof that the rigor of MyView is super high comparatively? So the more we do this, the more inferences we can make over time.
I think anecdotally we did find that Amplify, that same thing happened with Amplify. The kids really struggled in the beginning accessing the assessments because the level is much higher than they're used to. So there might be a little bit of growing pain there, getting used to new programs and the expectations, and just having the stamina. I think stamina has come up over the year, just that the kids really struggle with the stamina. We need to increase that, so all things to look into. Okay, so we're on this one. This is sort of more overall growth. This is my view and STAR. So these are winter assessments, so you're not looking at growth from one to the next in this one. You're looking at, if you look at that, the first two bars, you're looking at the My View assessment for kindergarten and the STAR assessment for kindergarten. But both winter. So what we're looking for in this graphic is alignment, and we can see that in kindergarten we're doing okay. Both of those assessments are close. In grade 1 we're doing okay. Grade 2 we're doing okay, and then whoa, something's going on 3, 4, 5 between the assessments. They're just not coming out the same. And then these are the next steps. So figuring out where are these gaps coming from. Is there assessment alignment issues? Are there assessment alignment issues? Growth patterns, so where is there strong alignment? We're looking pretty good in K2. And then we need to dig into that 5th grade issue to better triangulate what's going on with that and look into the instructional practices. And then also looking at the upper grades benefiting from integration of curriculum and assessment methods. So those are all sort of next steps for year 1. I think that's it.
So I think I'll just say that there is a lot of work that goes into planning when you make a shift to a new curriculum, and you'll learn more about that when I share some of the work that we've been doing around professional learning under my agenda item. But there's a lot of planning that goes into what's the next professional learning that needs to happen. So Gab and her team are really working at unpacking all of this, along with a lot of other data from the teacher perspective as well, to try to think about what does next year look like? What does the professional learning look like at in-service, and how do we utilize other time that we have with teachers to be able to hone in and continuously improve on our practice, because ultimately that's what's going to create better opportunities for students, which should lead to better outcomes. So it's deep work and it's not always visible. So I really appreciate Leah taking the first crack at pulling this together in your work on this, Gab, and you sharing this. It's helpful for people to see.
Thank you. Thanks, Gab. You bet. Appreciate it. Okay, that brings us to Morgan.
Okay, I'm gonna be brief. This time around, I only have that one action item. I emailed your audit to you on March 24th. And if you are ready, I would like a motion to accept the FNESU FY24 Federal Compliance Audit. I'll point out that this is coming 3 days after we started the next one. So we can't seem to ever get ahead.
I'll make that motion to accept the FY24 federal compliance audit. We'll do that by roll. Sarah?
Aye.
Miranda?
Aye.
Nakua?
Aye.
Meredith and I.
And other than that, I will tag team with Lynn on some of the updates, but I
Okay.
have nothing else.
Great, thanks. Lynn, you're up.
So we have some new tools that we've been using, so our visuals look a little different tonight. So Courtney is going to drive this. We'll jump into personnel. I will start off with hiring information. So the first side is informational, that's all support staff. On the right side, those are the items that we'll need action on. So Heidi Berman is a special educator beginning next year. Kendra Pillsbury, moving from school counselor to special ed in Bakersfield, began March 5th on that. So I'll ask for a motion to approve hiring.
I'll make that motion.
Thanks, Akua. We'll do that by roll. Sarah?
Aye.
Miranda?
Aye.
Akua?
Aye.
Mary is an aye.
Resignations, the left is informational, those are support staff. We haven't met since January, so we're doing a lot of catch up in this meeting to give you some context of what has happened. We have action on the right side. These are resignations. We have Bridget Adams, special educator at Steps, Diane Kane, part-time special educator, Emily Bouthillette, literacy interventionist, Kathleen Thompson, school counselor, school-based clinician at Steps, Andrew Cook will be moving from an SU position as a literacy interventionist to an ELA classroom teacher position at Sheldon. And this slide is coming before the ask I'm gonna have on a future slide. But Ginny Rainville, it's not really a resignation, it's a year's leave of absence, which I'll request in a little bit. So if you could make a motion to approve the action on those resignations.
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Akua. By roll. Sarah?
Aye.
Miranda? Aye. Akua?
Aye.
Mary is an aye.
We have several open positions. This is what we know for now. Contracts were due today, so we have just under half that have returned their contracts. We do know because we're still in the negotiation process with teachers that some of them are hoping that we will settle before they sign their contract. So we'll talk a little bit about that under negotiations, but for now, these are the positions that we know that we have open for this next year. And this time around, I have 2 leave requests for you that will require action. The first is, just as a reminder, all professional leave requests have to get approved by the board. So Haley Paquette, one of our special educators, ran out of leave time, so the request is for a half day of unpaid leave from March 21st. So to ask the board to approve that. And then do you want me to do Ginny at the same time?
Oh, I want to do it separately.
Sure.
So I'll make that motion to approve, or, well, how's everyone feel about that request on the half day? Okay, I'll make that motion for Haley Paquette. By roll. Sarah?
Aye.
Miranda? Aye. Akua?
Aye.
Mary's an aye.
So Virginia Rainville has been a longtime special educator working at Richford Junior Senior High School. There is an open position there for middle school ELA teacher position. So Ginny is interested in trying that position on. But she would like to get a year's leave of absence from her special educator position. So that she wants to know if it's gonna be a match with the classroom teacher position. We've done that in the past. And she's someone that has been really committed here, and we think that Ginny is someone who's likely to want to stay here. I would encourage the board to approve her leave of absence.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. By roll. Sarah?
Aye.
Miranda? Aye. Akua?
Aye.
Mary's an aye.
So Morgan is going to help me on the legislative updates. I will be honest, if you miss a day in the legislature, you're behind. And it has been the kind of week where I haven't watched, I don't know if I even dare to admit this, but I haven't watched a minute of any sessions this week. So I'm gonna tag Morgan in to talk about H454.
So H454 is the education transformation bill. It has been voted out of the House and is now in the Senate. I've not watched anything in the Senate this week, but they're basically getting the introduction to the bill. So their legislative council and the folks in the House who passed the bill out are sort of just going through the almost 200 pages of it, telling them what's in there. There was a few amendments that were considered on the floor when it was in the House. They were, one was accepted, the others were not. And it didn't do any major changes to it, so I'll kind of walk through the bill high level. I think Enosburg board got it, NMV board probably got an earlier version of the update. The bill would have new districts go live on July 2029. Those lines would be drawn by a subcommittee of the Commission on the Future of Public Education, which is the study group that was created last year. They would have a group of 9 people added to that who would propose up to 3 different maps for the legislature to consider. The committee is now 3 retired superintendents, 1 retired business manager, 1 retired business manager or school board member, 2 current reps, and 2 current senators. There's also the addition of a voting board task force. So that group would kind of pay attention to what the district line committee was doing and start planning out how those new districts would vote. Because there's a 1 person, 1 vote requirement in the state. So they would start thinking about how those lines will work within those new districts. There will be class size minimums requirements that go live July 2026 and proficiency-based graduation requirements that go live July 2027, and then a single statewide calendar that would go live July of 2029. There are restrictions to paying high school tuition that go into effect right away, assuming this passes. Any students who are currently going to a high school that is no longer eligible to receive tuition would be grandfathered in so they could continue their high school education in those schools.
Can you elaborate on what those high school tuition restrictions are?
As I understand it, and this is also likely to change a little bit in the Senate, it would largely take away private out-of-state schools from consideration. So the Stansteads of the world and schools in the US that are private. Public schools in Vermont are still eligible. Public schools outside of Vermont but in the US are still eligible. And then there's a universe of in-state private schools that could still be eligible, and that's right.
Like the academies.
The academies, I think, would be, it feels to me like the Rices of the world would no longer be, but there's a lot of kind of intricate details around those schools that I think we would need to figure out once that passes.
But this will go into effect immediately, you said, if
Correct.
This passes.
But again, any student who was in a school this current year is going to be able to continue on in that school.
Right, but our families who are poised and ready to go for the fall, they would be affected by this.
Correct.
Okay. Okay.
Yep. And there's only one on the NMV side that I know of, that I've heard of, that has reached out to make sure that the school that their 9th grader is planning on attending would be eligible, and I've told them that they're eligible under the current rules, but they might not be under these rules.
Right.
In terms of the new funding formula, that would also go live in 2029. We would be receiving a flat dollar amount per kid with additional weights for different categories such as poverty, English language learner, and special ed. Under this construct, there's no additional money for different grade levels, which is different than how we currently weight kids in Vermont. There will also be a grant program for districts that have a certain level of population sparsity, and grants for districts that operate schools that are small by necessity. The rules around what is considered small by necessity are not yet developed, but that's part of this bill, and that will be developed over the next year. It removes the way we currently pay tuition, so to the extent that there is still school choice in these new districts, those schools would actually only receive the amount of money that that kid was weighted for with that flat payment. So that will be a change for some of the schools that currently have a carve out to charge more than in public schools.
So would they not be allowed to charge more, or it would be the onus would be on the family to make up the difference?
That's up to them to figure out. What we would see from our point is that we would know in advance what every high school leaving our district would cost us, because it would be that flat dollar amount, and it would be the same as the flat dollar amount that we're receiving for that kid.
But we don't even know if districts would still have choice for high school choice, right? They
Sure.
might assign a certain number of dedicated high schools, so the kind of choice
Yeah.
piece and tuition differential is somewhat moot then.
There is a lot that we don't know.
Yeah, and I would be surprised if something comes through with nothing related to that, related to choice. I think that'll still be contemplated in some way.
Yeah,
I think that it will be more limited
right,
than what it has been in the past, that's just my instinct. But again, this is gonna move through Senate very differently than it moved through House.
right, of course.
So on the funding formula, when we're at a flat amount per kid, it also means that there's gonna be a flat tax rate that every district has to start with. That rate will be able to be split on the non-homestead side across 3 different categories now. So currently there's a homestead rate and a non-homestead rate. What this bill creates is there'd be a non-homestead residential rate. So second homes, camps, I think is what they're going after on that. Maybe Airbnbs are there. A non-homestead commercial rate, which would be business property, and then a non-homestead rental rate, which I believe is anticipated to be long-term rentals. And so I think what we see is the legislature giving itself the tools that, we're in a housing crisis, so they may make the tax rate for a rental property advantageous compared to an Airbnb property. Districts would be allowed to spend over that flat amount per kid. It would be limited to 10% of what their base payment is. And there's a mechanism whereby all of the money that is raised to cover that additional spending would be raised within that district. And it's hard to explain, I'm happy to do it offline, but they've set it up in a way, one, that they think will meet the Brigham requirement, and 2, it will also raise additional money in most districts, and that money would then be moved into a capital construction fund. So for 20 years, we've been talking about needing a capital construction fund again in the state, and they've kind of used this as a way to figure out how to fund that. There's also will be some changes to how it feels to people who are paying their property tax based on income. I haven't dug into this deeply. Currently, we have a year lag, so you sort of get a credit that you get to apply to your next year's property tax bill. They're working to make that impact in the same fiscal year. There's some other changes that will likely get tweaked in the Senate, a little bit around authority between the State Board of Ed and the Agency of Education. And then there's a recognition that the funding formula doesn't really cover adult education, special education, transportation, and pre-K education. And so there's some studies and recognition that those things might change before it goes live.
Any questions on that?
I have a couple of questions. What about any mention of healthcare? Will just stay the same as a statewide healthcare, it's not in there.
Yeah, it's not in here at all. Everybody seems to recognize that it's a problem. Your association has sort of taken the lead there in bringing that to people's attention, but I don't think there's a bill that would change anything.
There, it really honestly hasn't even, I've been a little surprised at how little aerospace has gotten in the conversation, because we're talking about the costs associated with public education.
Right,
And most of our costs are connected to staff in
right,
terms of what we fund. And health insurance has grown exponentially over these last handful of years. And so it is one of the largest cost drivers in our education system, and it's been not centered.
I'm just
There's
surprised.
this myopic focus on
Yeah,
education, where other parts of what's happening in Vermont's economy are also adding to the perfect storm that we're in. Healthcare being a large
right.
one.
And any mention of whether there would be a statewide teacher contract, or if districts would continue, because now we're gonna be in these much larger
Yeah,
districts, would districts continue to negotiate, or would it be a
The way it's
statewide
currently-
contract?
when they first started talking about it, my perception was they're advocating for a statewide contract. I think that isn't likely. It's likely to be those districts, unless something again changes in Senate. Those districts that get merged together will have to look at their agreements and try to come up with agreements for all the pieces of your CBA, including salary. And I can tell you that that will not be an easy task. It'll be a very, very challenging task. Any other questions on that part? Okay, so I will talk a little bit about the literacy bill. So last year, Act 139 passed, actually it might have been 2 years ago, because we went live this last year. So the literacy bill passed that required us to make shifts in the early years to more of an evidence-based, systematic, explicit evidence-based reading instruction. So we just shared with you a lot of data around the shifts that we made to be in compliance around Act 139. So that required us to lean into 2 new literacy programs, and that has required a lot of effort to try to support our educators with that shift and roll that into our system. Other parts of that bill have required some things around assessment and communications out when kids fall below, significantly below proficiency standards. In the bill this year, they're looking at expanding that from K through 3. Is it K through 3 right now? I think it's K through 3 right now. And to K through 12. So that these assessment measures, which we don't have at all grade levels right now, but I'm not quite clear on if they're recommending more assessments so that all grade levels would be covered. But that there would be reporting out to families on that, and that schools shall provide I'm sorry, I just lost it. It talks about providing the support that the students need, obviously, when they're off level, so that ties back to our MTSS system and work. And I'll talk a little bit about that when we get into our professional learning piece. So we're just seeing really an expansion of that idea that was in the previous literacy bill to expand all grade levels of students. And again, I have not gone super deep in that bill, but that's the way I'm understanding it. The other bill that we'll talk about is H480, and that is the miscellaneous ed bill. Every year, that's kind of where all the things that don't have another home end up in the miscellaneous ed bill. So 2 of the things that when we were prepping for this, Morgan pointed out was there are requirements around epinephrine, and cardiac arrest trainings in schools. There's also, I pulled some of this information online, and I will be transparent that because things are moving, this might not be completely accurate for today. There's stuff in the miscellaneous ed bill around school safety, post-secondary education, nutrition contracts, There are things around virtual learning, the appointment process for the Secretary of Education, and there is a language in there that repeals requirements for the agency to establish data collection guidelines for behavioral threat assessments, which supervisory unions and independent schools were to comply with starting in 23-24. So that's kind of a little backtracking because there were no rules and procedures that came out related to those expectations. And so there's been a little bit of pushback from, honestly, us around having reporting requirements before we've had guidelines or rules established around that. So there's some changes around dates associated with that work. And I think that's kind of like the broad brush stroke around that. There may be other smaller bills that we're not really tuning into, I'll be completely honest. Most years we're tracking a much higher number of bills, but H 454 is so large, it's really the only thing we're really focusing on really clearly. We'll continue to watch the literacy bill, which is now, I think, woven in to H 480, I think I heard that today, so we'll continue to watch those two as well. There's nothing else really rising to the top for me right now, but we'll keep watching. So we'll talk a little bit about the federal education update and ask Morgan to tag in with me on this. There were some things in the news this week that I just wanted to name out loud. There was, don't remember if it was VPR or who ran the story, but it was connected to after school programs. And so I did get some questions from a community member if this was going to impact FNESU. So there was some systems who had applied for something called late liquidation funding around ESSER. That we did not do that. We use all of our ESSER funding, and we've talked to the board at length about that we spent everything we had left on the highly engaging materials that are now in all of our schools. So some systems had set aside money. I have a colleague who they were doing an HVAC system, and other colleagues who had set aside some of that late liquidation money to pay for next summer program. So the federal level, all of that was stopped. So there is no late liquidation anymore. So all those funds that were obligated are now not there. So there are schools that are scrambling because they've lost the funding that they thought they already had secured. But I just wanted to say out loud for the public to hear, for now, that has not impacted our 21C funding. I will be honest with you, I pulled up some information. There was an article, I think just late last week, on some of the federal funding shifts that have impacted Vermont, and I have looked through and I can see that some of them, although are not directly tied to education, they certainly have an impact. Things around mental health, humanities funding, academic grants, things around libraries and pieces like that. So it does feel like we're in a place in time where, holding my breath a little, right now we seem to be okay, but we're gonna keep an eye on it. Title funding, our Titles 1, 2, and 4, we've reported to this board on that already, that we think we're okay. This year we created a buffer by not filling certain positions that where people have either moved on or retired in our grant funding positions. Some of those principals strategically seeing some of this coming, move those positions into local budgets this year. So we do have a buffer with our title funding so we can weather a storm of some level of reduction this year. We also are strategically not filling some local positions in our local budget so that if we need some additional buffer, we have that there to be able to cover remaining positions with our title fund positions. Do you want to add anything to that, Morgan? We're trying to be as strategic as we can, looking forward beyond next year when we're budgeting for FY 27 that will likely be a different story. So we're not likely going to be trying to maintain a lot of positions in our federally funded grant money. So there's that. There has been a lot of conversation around the state around the Title VI certification, and I want to just talk through what that looked like. So I think it was 2 weeks ago, this past Friday, superintendents were told that they would need to certify that we're in compliance with Title VI, which is something that we do regularly related to grant funding. So it is certifying that you will not discriminate on the basis of race. So on its face, that seems like an easy thing to certify. In the requirement that came out of the federal level, there are other documents that are attached to the certification. There is your colleague letter, and then there's an FAQ attached beyond that. And they tried to add in some pieces there that are not in the actual statute around Title VI. And they're pointing to things like working on social emotional skills with students as being veiled racial discrimination, and pointing to diversity, equity, and inclusion work as being racially discriminatory. So Vermont's first response to that was they were going to assign that responsibility to certify to each superintendent in the state of Vermont. They chose to pull back on that and decide to have a state level response related to that. The threat around the Title VI certification, what was being pointed to was not clear. There was no clear definitions around what they were trying to say. The new interpretations were at the federal level. So the state ended up choosing, the Secretary Saunders worked with the Attorney General, Vermont's Attorney General on this, and instead of certifying, wrote a letter to the people who are monitoring this and said that Vermont certifies that we are in compliance with Title VI. We do not discriminate against anyone on the basis of race, and there's no definition to what you're pointing to, and what we are doing in Vermont schools is not discriminatory. So it wasn't exactly what the federal government was asking for, but it is certifying that what we're doing is legal in the state of Vermont. So I know there's been a lot of media on this, a lot of press on this. It has become pretty divisive, as have a lot of things in our world right now. So happy to answer questions if you have them. So we have, we're in the process of negotiating with support staff and teachers. I will give you a support staff negotiation update. The two sides met on Monday, April 16th, for our fourth negotiation session. It was a very productive meeting. Both sides made really good progress towards coming to an agreement. I think both sides felt good when they left that meeting. We are scheduled to meet again on Tuesday, April 29th, and I'm hopeful that we'll be able to settle on that night. I'll ask Morgan to give the teacher negotiation update.
So we met with the teachers last night, April 15th. We still have a lot of ground to cover with them. We're working right now to quantify the full impact of both their proposed increases to salary grid, additional advances for a few subsets of their staff, and then the cost related to the other proposed changes to the workday and work year and some of the smaller language pieces. We'll be meeting with them again on April 30th, and we'll see where that goes.
Any questions on that? So I will want to go into executive session under administrator negotiations. That's something you asked me to come back to this board about when we met in January.
Yeah.
So I'm prepared to give a report there. Mary, when you and I did our pre-meet, we talked about coming back to this topic about early release days. We had a visitor at a meeting, so you asked for a more detailed report. So I just wanted to remind this board that at our January meeting, you approved our school calendars for the 25-26 school year. We have 2 calendars because we still have quarters at Enosburg Falls Middle High School and Richford Junior Senior High School and Cold Hollow. Because they operate on a semester rotation. We have shifted to trimesters that happened several years ago at this point for our other schools, so that's the distinction between these 2 calendars. Other than where those reporting periods end, they're the exact same calendars. In this, there are early release Tuesdays in this calendar for next year, and I wanted to give a more thorough report on how we use that, because I think when people have asked about it, I think that my standard response is we use that time to work on professional learning. And in my mind, professional learning means a lot of things, and I'm gonna unpack all of that today. So it is not teachers sit and get information. This is you'll see in this report what it represents. So we were able to pull together a report that unpacks school-specific and district-specific routines around our Tuesday early release time. So just to give an overview before I go deeper in this, each school dismisses students 1 hour early on Tuesdays. It's not all at the same time because they all naturally have a different end time to the day. So it is 1 hour early. Our support staff stays with any students who don't go home on the bus. They're able to stay through the end of the day. They also can enroll in our LEAPS programs, and we operate those programs. And I want to say 5 o'clock, but I know some have slightly different end times, but whatever the end time is. So there are options for families who struggle with that 1 hour early release to be able to stay. When we went to the board about this a few years ago, that was an important piece that the board asked that we figure that out, so that if families need support for students, that we would have that opportunity through the care for that last hour and the shift to leave. So we do have that embedded. So really the school-specific early release Tuesday, it's tailored to be able to provide professional learning and also collaboration. So it's pretty strategic, and there is some flexibility with the principals to be able to use the time to work on some of their local priorities, their district priorities, or to be able to use that for team collaboration time. You'll see as we go through this, a lot of collaborative team meetings happen on Tuesdays that on a regular day, what some may not understand is that we have pretty tight restrictions on the hours that teachers work, and trying to be able to schedule within the student day time for PLC teams to meet, or for our MTS, I'm using acronyms, I'm going to try to do better. Times where teachers get together to talk about teaching and learning and looking at student data and instruction. So they also, this is time when, I talked to you about the literacy bill. It's time where we can provide professional learning to support teachers in some of the requirements that, quite frankly, come down every year that require shifts in the way we do business. There was a big bill several years ago, Act 173, that required us to really fundamentally shift how we support students who struggle, and that we have built an entire MTSS system around that work. That requires ongoing planning time for teachers and interventionists and special educators to be able to come together and look at students and make determinations based on data, who needs additional support in what skills, and who needs maybe enrichment, and how we're going to plan for that. So my point is that collaborative team time can happen there because everybody's available during that hour. We do it on Tuesdays strategically because that's a day that is a regular staff meeting day. So it really gives those principals 2 hours because it gives the the early release hour, and then the time they would have had for their afternoon meeting. They're very data-driven in this time, and they're focused on professional learning. So I won't read all of these to you, I'll release this report to you, but we looked at each school and looked at how do they structure this time. And they have some autonomy to be able to structure it how they need to for the school's specific time. So you can see what they're doing, how they divide out their time, what their focus area is, and what the key activities are for each of those focus areas. And then what do they do for the first hour, and then what do they do for the second hour on those days. Richford Junior Senior High School, this is how they have structured their time. So you see that there's a little bit of time, 20 minutes after the students leave, where they could do Power School updates, some things, some prep things, some IT scheduling, and also they then shift into their team meeting rotations, and then they have collaborative time all the way until 4 o'clock, where those teachers get together. It might be all of the ELA teachers get together and they do some, they look at assessments together, do some planning around that. So that it's time for deep collaborative work. Montgomery Elementary, this is how they have laid out that time. A lot of this is specific to teacher meeting times, like I described in others. And moving forward from here, I can go a little faster because they're using it in a very similar way. Enosburg Middle High School has set aside time for implementing Wayfinder, working on our Portrait of a Learner work, and then they have rotating activities. They have system improvement teams that have time that are set into the Tuesday time. Cold Hollow, they have time set aside. Each teacher has a part of the Tuesday to work on a project that they're working on. So they have been able to sit down on some of that work, and they each have a project. Several of them are working on building portfolios with students, so they have some time to work on that. They have full team meetings, and then they also have time to work on their technical standards. They have like an added layer at Cold Hollow because they have those technical standards to get to. Bakersfield, very similar to others, collaboration, professional learning, flexible planning time. Sheldon has outlined the ELA professional development, collaboration data. PLC, very similar to Berkshire. Very similar to Enosburg Elementary. In terms of how the district uses that time, we did have access to educators. So for example, Gab reported out on the rollout of our early literacy, our K-5 literacy program. So every first Tuesday of the month, from 2 to 4, we were able to work with those teachers teaching kindergarten through grade 2, and they had 2 hours of professional learning. So what that did was it provided 14 more hours of professional learning that we could give to those teachers to help them to integrate into this new program. Similar structure for 3rd through 5th and 6th through 8. Leah outlined what the plan was in terms of what the focus was on the professional learning during those times so that the board is aware, and then reported out on the strong teacher attendance that we had during that time. So I know that it is, when you just say early release, it's easy to make assumptions about how that time is being used. I hope getting into a little more detail about how important that time is for our teachers to be able to work with one another, and how we have worked to have a workaround for working families that have a hard time with that 1 hour early release. So I'm open to questions if anyone has them.
I appreciate being able to see it laid out like that. It's really helpful. And it sounds as though the time is being used really effectively. And do you hear generally from teachers and building leaders that this time is kind of welcome and appreciated by them?
I think the majority, and some of the people when they did the survey said, just so you know, my teachers wish there was more time, which we can't give them. But they really appreciate having the time, being able to meet when they otherwise would not. They would have to try to find a different way to be able to do it, and it's really important work. I think that where we have seen pushback is that we have admittedly had slower starts in some of our buildings with getting really strategic and very well planned for how they're going to use that time. When that has tightened back up, I think that we've gotten more positive feedback. We have not done a survey. That's something that's on our radar, that we might get some feedback from teachers, not really looking for should we do it, should we not do it. I think it's more around how are you utilizing this time? What benefits are you getting from the time? What recommendations would you have to make it even more impactful? Things like that. We'll work to create a survey for the teachers who are using it. But I would say the majority of people think this is really important time.
Yeah, and how about for families? Are we finding that because we have the support staff available for the kids that don't leave early and go home on a bus and then they can transition into the leaves, are generally, have we gotten feedback from families around how impactful or not it is for their lives?
I think when we first made the transition, there were people that just had questions. I'm not getting, I can't think of the last time that I've had feedback from families that they haven't figured this piece out, because I think we have given some solution for them. That there isn't a bus that goes at 3, so there is that, you either take the bus at 2, or you could pick up at 3, or you could stay and you could pick up at 5 or 4:45, whenever that shifts. So I think we've tried to accommodate any of those options with families. Does it mean that everybody loves it? I'm sure, no. I would like to think, our goal is always to help our students to be as successful as they can be. And I would hope that as people really think about, and if they were watching this, dig into what we just shared about how important that time is for teachers. I hope they would understand that it's really an impactful strategy that's improving teaching and learning for our students.
And then prior to the transition to Tuesdays, was there time set aside at other times for this type of work, or was this a new block of time that we were able to obtain?
So this was a new block of time. What we had tried, I think for 1 year, maybe 2, I think it was 1 month. We tried to do 3 additional half days per year, so we would send students home right after lunch. And then we would have a half day chunk where teachers could collaborate. We found that it was not regular enough for them to be able to do the kind of work that they need to do to dig into this. Some leaders were embedding professional learning community time or MTSS time into their schedules. I will say it's getting much harder to do that as we have fewer electives to be able to offer, because we also have increased expectations around planning time, that we have to make sure that everybody has an adequate amount of planning time. So you can't say you have to be on this day if you haven't already found another way to give planning time. So this just opened up a window for us to be able to use that we never really had before. Anything else on that, Mary?
No, I think that's great, thank you.
Okay, the last piece I have for you today is year end. I will say that is a question I get a lot. When is the last student day of the year? And I always, Courtney knows this from the years that we've worked together, is April, and I set my alarm this morning for my typical 4:45. I got up, checked the weather, checked in with my road crew, thought, could it be? I think we're okay. I mean, we're all not home yet, but I'm always reluctant to talk about when's our last day going to be. We've had years where mud has gotten in our way. We had a flooding year where we had a day we had to close in June, I think. I think it was very late in June. So I'm going to make a request of this board today, based on the information that we have in this moment, and I'll just say it's subject to change with Vermont's weather. Right now, we have had 4 snow days, January 2nd, February 6th, February 13th, and February 17th. So right now, our anticipated last day of school would be on June 17th. So we are required in statute to have 175 student days. We have had 176 in our collective bargaining agreement with teachers for some time. We have always, when we've had more than a couple of snow days, we've always waived one of them for the students so that we're not keeping them through the end of a long week into that 3rd week of June. So what I request of the board is that you follow the past practice that you have had and waive that final student day and allow us to give that to some time for us to work with teachers in preparation for the next school year. So I would ask the board if you're so inclined to make a motion to waive that last student day. I won't go under that 175. I know that there is a process to make requests, and I think it's very important to me that we stay with what the expectation is in the statute. So it will not ask the agency to go below that, but you have the authority to come down to that.
Okay. I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Akua. We'll do that by roll. Sarah?
Aye.
Miranda? Aye. Akua?
Aye.
Mary is an aye.
That is all I have for you today. It's not actually, I have one executive when you're all done.
Of course, thanks, Lynn. Okay, so we'll move on then to our central office updates and start off with Dominic.
I put a little bit of info about a new system that we rolled out, but I'll give you a little more detail. So we've implemented a system called InfoSec IQ. It was provided by the Agency of Education through grant funds, and it's designed to provide cybersecurity awareness to training to employees. Has 3 key components. The first is asynchronous training opportunities. So we started monthly micro-learning opportunities, and we're going to short 3 to 5 minute videos, followed by a quick 5-question assessment. Try to kind of make things bite-sized and help drive up our numbers of people that are taking the time to do it. And to just give an idea of what type of topics that we're covering this month, it was on phishing awareness. Next month, it's around best practices around passwords. So the second component is phishing simulations. The system will send out simulated phishing emails to employees from time to time so that it can actually be tested in real time. So we can learn from mistakes when we get those types of messages and fall for them and click a link instead of actually having something potentially dangerous happen. You can instead come to a page saying, you've been phished, but this was a simulation, so your data's safe, and gives percentages to me so I can see how we're doing over time, what percentage of those are getting through and people are clicking on.
I will say that Dominic has got me. I'm pushing.
Thank you.
He came to my door when I fell for it, didn't I? Yes. And I'll even admit that, did you too?
I did
The
too.
assessment piece, I learned that I need to read very carefully because not the only one in this room that also didn't do well and Dominic gets our scope results. I felt like I had to self-identify. Dominic, I got a 60 on my assessment. I didn't read those first few questions. I'll do better next time, John.
Yeah, it's our first month. So the third component is to help with identifying and helping me analyze when phishing messages come in. So it's a Gmail plugin called Phish Notify. So when someone gets a suspicious message, they can use that, and it submits it into InfoSec, where I've got a safe environment that I can analyze it, go through all the links and domains that are in it, and see if there really was something malicious. You know, do we need to block this sender? Do we need to reach out to the user and make sure they didn't click on any of the links, that kind of stuff. And to illustrate the importance of this type of training, I looked up a quick stat. Some studies have shown that human error is responsible for 95% of security breaches. And the phishing scams are the biggest part of that. So, and just a couple other quick things. Another project I'm currently working on is I'm creating an onboarding app to help streamline the onboarding process to automatically assign tasks related to the onboarding process for employees. So for all of us, as far as assigning key cards, devices, greeting accounts, that sort of thing. And we also have a small team of us, including Gabrielle and myself and our Leah and our Robert, our two tech integrationists. We're working on creating an AI roadmap because it's such a big growing area that we want to make sure we have some really solid plans about how we want to move forward with that. And so we're getting those plans ready, so we're ready to hit the ground running next year with some guidelines and professional development. And I'll be doing a spotlight in August, so I can provide some more details on those things at that time.
Thank you so much, Dominic, appreciate it. Gab, do you have anything else that you'd like to highlight?
I
did a pretty in-depth
I won't
spotlight.
say much, that was a lot, but I will just, I think Lynn kind of alluded to this, but we're in the process of collecting lots of year-end data around getting feedback from students, parents, and teachers, grading and reporting, Portugal Learn implementation, the last in-service, and we're sifting through all the in-service data and trying to figure out how that might impact next year. So just a lot of year-end stuff. And
Great, thank you so much. Michelle?
All right. So in special education, students that have specific qualifications get what's called extended school year, and we call it ESY for short. So this is a long process to organize, but we have successfully, I think, arranged and staffed extended school year for students in our Rise and Steps program, and this was accomplished through collaborative efforts with the LEAPS program. So I'm happy about that, and now we're currently working on school level ESY services. In the past few months, I have met with MVSD, Addison Northwest, St. Johnsbury, Harwood, and Orleans South to discuss the Steps and Rise program. So some people came and visited in person, and some people were online and asking me for documents and how did I get started with the alternative program and what do our leases look like and who is in it and how did you communicate that with the board and the community. So that's been exciting to be able to share one of my passions with other SUs and being at the forefront of that. So I know that 3 of them are actually organizing and getting ready to start for next year, so.
And there will be more reaching out to you because it's something that comes up regularly is people are probably asking tell me more about that because we've been able to present on that a couple of times and so it's very good work, Michelle. Yeah. Thank you for doing it, thank you for sharing.
Yeah, the past few weeks have been very challenging at Steps. That's also part of it. We're brainstorming some ways to continue to meet the needs of all of our students. Additionally, we use a tool for writing goals for IEPs, and this is called Goalbook. And this platform provides progress monitoring tools as well. And I'm gonna kind of chuckle about this, but the special educators, we have a lot of new special educators, so this is a tool that really supports them in learning how to write IEP goals. And I make it mandatory for people to use, and because of that, the company asked to write an article about FNESU. And I should have put this in my board notes, but it's called How a Rural District Established Consistency in Creating Standards-Aligned IEP Goals. And I will share that all with you after, but if you take a moment to walk by my office, they too were proud to write this article, and they sent me a copy of it. It is giant, and I'm burning it up on my wall, but it's quite large, and anyway, it's in my office, if anyone wants to check that out. And then I would say that one of the most important things since the last time we met is that, and Lyndon mentioned it earlier, that we successfully navigated a mid-year staff transition, and I would say that we did it with minimal disruption to services. It was a difficult transition. I recognize the worry that this brought to families that received like notification that, hey, your special educator is no longer going to be working with your child. But actually the change has yielded some unexpected benefits for students, and some students that were not willing to work with certain people now have fresh perspective, and it's like they're refreshed. And I have to give a lot of thanks to Stacy Cattell-Godin, who spent a great deal of time between two schools to ensure that went as seamless as possible. And then that's it.
Great, thank you so much. Michelle,
Yeah, I'm gonna pass, the first thing up from my report is the code of conduct that we're working on. So Michelle and I kind of co-facilitate our behavior multi-tiered system of support system improvement team. And one of the things that this team has identified this year, and it came from a variety of sources. So there was a parent group that I was meeting with that identified it. The MTSS team has really taken it up for their work, and it's establishing. What's that?
Can you just identify the other members of your team, your APs?
Yeah. So the team is some assistant principals, some behavior, BCBAs, school psychologists. Robin.
Yeah.
And so the goal of this code of conduct that we've drafted is really to help people understand sort of our commitment to what respectful communication looks like at all levels across the supervisory union. We modeled it after something we saw from Burlington, and we've modified it to fit both our vision and sort of where we think we want to be. And what we're doing right now is collecting stakeholder feedback from all of the groups that are referenced in here around the content and the clarity of the language. So in the board report, I gave you a link to a feedback survey. I would love for people to take an opportunity to read through this code of conduct and respond to that survey around how clear is it, how important are the items, do you feel like you can, this is something we could support. And so our goal is then to roll it out for fall district-wide. And so the team is working on modifications at the end of the school year, and then a strategy for that rollout with the leadership team over the end of the year in the summer. And we're really, this is the first part of a sort of redesign of some of our behavioral practices here to systematize a little bit more across schools. So there'll be more on that to come, but we've had some really great, really productive meetings. I think everybody we've shared this with so far has been pretty excited about it. And it gives us an opportunity to sort of hold people accountable to this is how we're doing business here. This is how we're going to interact with each other. And kind of point to this code of conduct as a place to be able to hold people accountable. So that's the big piece I wanted to give you sort of some highlights around. A couple other little things, well, not so little, but we have an opportunity to send a group of students to a statewide program around harassment and bullying, hazing, harassment, and bullying prevention. So they got to go to a conference last Friday where they participated with students from all over the state, and the goal is to bring back what they learned, work with their peers at their schools, and then our goal is to expand that to all of our schools for next year. So we'll be having opportunities for all the schools to send representatives to go back into their schools. So it's really about kind of helping people understand what hazing, harassment, and bullying is, and how to prevent it, and how to be an upstander as a student. So how do you stop it when you see it? So that's another big component. And then the last piece I added on my report was really we did an annual survey on family engagement, and so the results of that survey are there linked for you, and then we'll be sharing that out in our community newsletter, staff newsletter, so that people can see sort of the results of that survey. High level.
Great. Thank you so much, Michelle. Heather?
A couple of program highlights. We're in full swing in our final session for the school year. As I put in my board notes, we've been doing some, like, kind of the last part of the year, competitions and stuff from our programs. Junior Iron Chef, Montgomery had their first team competition there. We've worked with Russ Matia at the Enosburg High School to support their robotics program, to give them some extra hours after school, and they've competed in a couple of competitions. We're in full swing for summer planning. Our summer brochures have gone out end of last week, early this week, and registration's coming in. One change because of asbestos abatement at the Enosburg Elementary School. The Enosburg elementary students are partnering with the Bakersfield Summer Camp this year. So we've got both coordinators working together, co-planning, and both communities have been informed, and we'll bus the elementary students to Bakersfield and then back, like we do with the middle school students to go to the middle school camps. So transportation in effect effectively won't change for those families. And a couple of other updates, some fun stuff. Montgomery also had their play last week, which was excellent, and tomorrow and Friday, Richard Junior Senior High School and some students from Enosburg are performing plays at the town hall at 7. And we do also have a change next year for our morning programs. Leaves is no longer going to be leading morning programs at the 4-6 that we did in the past at elementary schools. We made that financial shift so that we can continue to focus on the enrichment after school programming that we're doing. And so communities are being kind of informed of that as well. And finally, I'm pretty excited to announce Lynn was talking about 21C funding, and so 21C funding is funded a year in advance actually to the state, so next year looks pretty stable for us. But there's a delegation going to DC next month, and I was picked to be one of 2 people in Vermont to represent Vermont to talk with members of Congress and share stories about the importance of after school programming and see what the landscape is and support for funding in the future.
And that's something that Vermont After School is sponsoring for you, right?
Yes, Vermont After School, and I believe it's the National After School Alliance together are sponsoring my trip to go.
That's great.
Bravo, I can't think of a better representative. That's wonderful. Okay, Jamie.
Okay, so let's see. I'll start with, we have hired 2 additional teachers since the January meeting and 7 support staff members. Unfortunately, we had 20 support staff members resign since the last meeting. That typically happens around February breaks and April breaks. So
There's also, I think, a connection to, right, like lead time and things like that with some of those.
yes, there is. So to date, we've had 31 total requests for FMLA. That's an additional 12 requests since the last meeting. And 4 of those will require licensed long-term subs, teacher subs. Let's see. So 5 of the new hires that I just mentioned, the support staff, were the behavior micro-credentialed paraeducators. So we've done that micro-credentialing and they're all working. We still need a few more, right? And let's see, right now we're kind of in the middle of the educator renewal period, licensing renewal period. So we have 52 teachers that are their license is gonna expire on June 30th. So there's a little bit of a lag in the renewal process at the AOE. So they're kind of trickling in, just a few right now. As of the contracts, when contracts went out, they hadn't processed any. So they're coming in faster now. And let's see. And I guess lastly, like Lynn said, we sent out contracts on April 1st. I sent out 235 contracts, and as of today at 4:30, we received 100 signed contracts back, 128 extension requests. So we had almost half of the teachers signed and got those back in, and we've had 7 resignations so far. And the requests for the extensions, the contracts are now due back on May 1st. Hopefully.
So one thing I will just say about that is we do know there's, is with all negotiations, there are strategies associated with it. And we know that this was a strategy, the union had meetings with educators, and there was some encouragement to ask for the extension. So it does position us in a not great way, just in terms of our timing for hiring. So for those contracts will be due on May 1st, we will need to move very quickly. So if we have contracts that are not returned by May 1st, I'm just foreshadowing my intention is to advertise right away, because it will be very important to be able to sell qualified candidates for us to move quickly. So Jamie's instruction on May 1st will be at the end of the day, whatever you don't have gets posted the next morning. We're hopeful that we'll get those. And many of the people have indicated they're returning, but they're just not gonna sign yet. They want the contract to be settled.
Right, understood. Okay, thank you.
Dawn. So we successfully completed our child nutrition review process. Last week, Lynn Morgan and myself, we were on our exit conference meeting for the 2 reviews. This review is a comprehensive evaluation that scrutinizes our programs and ensures compliance with USDA federal and state regulations. We were also subject to the procurement review, which thoroughly examined our food service vendors to verify that we are appropriately distributing federal funds, and that we're trying to keep as much of that federal funding within the US and whenever possible. Obviously, when we're talking some of our produce and fruits and whatnot, that just doesn't happen. We do have to look outside of the US. So in that event, there just is a form that we have to fill out for every time that we look and spend any money outside of the US. This review process, it requires an extensive amount of documentation to be submitted to the state. Once we exited that conference, I had to get onto a summer program training that is mandatory for me as well, only to find out that now we are underneath the summer review process. So we'll be going through that again for the summer. Our menus, we're continuing to run our cycle menus, which is 3 different menus that we run through the entire school year. Each menu has 6 weeks that we run. And then at the end of that 6 weeks, that 7th week, we go back to week 1 and run that. Usually the menus run like 2 cycles through. It really works well. It introduces us to some different things. There is a lot of seasonal, that's how the menu is kind of written up, is with seasonal vegetables and whatnot that are available and whatnot. Some of it we struggle to find the availability that we can serve, but for the most part we are trying to get it in and use that. We have found that the roasted carrot fries are something that the kids really like, so that's something that we really serve quite a bit. It's kind of funny that over to Michelle's program, some of the kids thought they were eating sweet potato fries, and once they learned different, they were quite shocked and enjoy them every time we send them over, so it's kind of nice to see things like that. And then in January, I submitted a federal grant application to purchase a new convection oven for Montgomery Elementary School. I'm not sure how old that oven was up there, but I believe that it is the original one from when they moved into that building. It just was starting to malfunction and we were having to have maintenance calls on that, and at that point, you're better off to start looking at purchasing something new. So there was a federal grant out there that covered 100% of that cost, and we did receive that grant. On March 31st, Vern and his staff member went out and met the truck up there, unloaded the oven with the company. It is a Blodgett oven, so it actually is right from Vermont, which is kind of nice. And Vern ended up being able to install that the same day. So on the first day of April, they were able to use the new oven. It's working great. And then, as it is everywhere, staffing is really our biggest challenge right now. Just finding staff that it's subbing staff. So when I have staff members out, a lot of the subbing is coming back to me. And so it's not that I don't mind doing it, but just sometimes when I have people out in 3 buildings, I can only be into one of them. And so that's something that we struggle with. But I have an awesome group of staff members that really know how to pull it together, and they're great at working and figuring out how they can still serve those meals even if they're short-staffed. So
I just want to say something about John's review. I sat in on that meeting, and as did Morgan, and I've always respected the work that you do and know that it is incredibly complicated. And every time I sit in on one of those conversations at the state level, I am reminded by the invisible complexity that you deal with every single day. I can't even begin to describe, from serving sizes to amount of grains, to the number of ounces, to the refrigeration checks and the safety plans. I was taking a list as we were having the conversation, and it was, to me, your level of responsibility even for what gets served in the classrooms, and then what happens in each of those classrooms for the fresh fruit and vegetable programs. It is, I don't think people realize, and I'm just so thankful that we have someone like you helping us to navigate all of that, because we would not pass those compliance tests without you. So thank you for what you are doing to support our schools and our students and feeding everybody.
Thank you so much, Dawn. Okay, Melissa?
For the past few years, I've been planting a seed about this idea of pre-K to K teaming. And seeds sometimes take a little time to get in there and take root. But last spring, Richford Elementary, I think they presented at the ERU meeting, really took hold of it, and they ran with this idea around teaming pre-K and K, and created this Family Friday event that they have once monthly to increase both family engagement and attendance in the early years. So establishing those connections early on. Through another opportunity, we've been able to secure some grant funding through UVM's Everyday Counts initiative, and we're now able to take that idea and introduce it to another school within our SU. So we'll be able to expand it, kind of make it that school's own thing, just like Richford made it their own. And it really gives our preschoolers an opportunity, preschoolers and families, and kindergartners, an opportunity to interact, get to know all the faces of the early ed team, and I say early ed as both pre-K and kindergarten, and make some genuine connections, and really feel that excitement to go to school. In the Richford program, they have on their Family Fridays, the families come in and are working with their children to do different activities. So it's an opportunity for parents and children to do those things together. And different community members are brought in, different school team members are brought in, and it's a great opportunity that we're really excited to be able to expand into another school. With that, we're also looking at the pre-KK bridge overall and looking at refining our systems in terms of preschool teachers are constantly collecting data on the development of children, and we're going to be working as a team of pre-K and K teachers to say, okay, this is the data that we're hoping to pass forward so you get a good picture of these preschoolers who are now coming into your classrooms. That's our kind of low-hanging fruit, is to figure out that data. And then we're going to be kind of digging into the routines, the expectations of both pre-K and K. So it's not feeling like it's such a shift when they're going from the structure of preschool into the structure of kindergarten. And preschoolers and families can feel more confident as they move through the system. And we should expect to see better outcomes in that because they'll feel good and have some knowledge about what kindergarten looks like. Again, Richford has already kind of started with that this month. They're starting with preschool visits into the kindergarten class fairly regularly. So they'll get to meet those kindergarten teachers. They'll get to see a morning meeting routine, a read aloud routine, and see what that looks like. So when they step in their first day of school, it's not this new world to them.
Can I add something about the grant?
Yeah.
So another component of that grant is we were able to get funding for the Richford team to add a second year to their rotation, so they're able to, next year what they're going to be doing is planning for a little more in-depth parent education for the parents who've already been through the Family Fun Fridays. Next year's is going to be a little bit more parent ed work in a deeper way. So, and then there's a couple other components to that same grant. I'll catch you up on it another time.
So thank you both, it's great. All right, Vern.
Yeah, we're ramping up for our summer projects. Seems like every year, one school gets more attention than the other school, so this year it's gonna be Eadsburg. What we basically did is about 4 or 5 months ago, I went to an ER meeting and I wanted to see where the board wanted me to concentrate. One of the schools is Eadsburg has a pretty large amount of asbestos, so I said I think it's about time we start looking at it. So we were able to, EHM got the bid to abate 9 classrooms as well as half the main hallway from the original school. So we're pretty excited about that. And one of the things, much like what Don was alluding to, a test. And Buck McAllister and I went to Missisquoi. We took a field trip to Missisquoi. They've been using them now for about 10 or 12 years and they're really holding up well. So I didn't want to make a decision all on my own, so I wanted to go out and get a little information. And so we did a field trip and they're holding up really well and they really like them. So we're going to try it and I think it's going to be pretty successful. Like I said, we put a fair amount in other schools. Richford High School has a large amount and they really like them there as well. It looks nice, but it's also a maintenance. It takes an incredible amount of maintenance to maintain a VCT floor with wax and stripping and everything. And quite frankly, we just don't have the bodies to do it anymore. So we had to look at a different avenue. I think this is what we're going to do. So basically, Enosburg will have an abatement. We'll have new flooring put in. The main office will get carpet squares, and also we're going to update the emergency lights and the exit lights. Also, they've got an issue there with speakers, so we are also putting in a speaker system to be able to notify the school better. And also, we had something a while back that we want to be able to not announce outside, so we'll have the ability to shut them off. Berkshire Elementary is, we're going to follow up with a a pretty successful project, I think, last year that went on at Richford High School. And we're gonna go through and put 2 new pellet boilers in at the Berkshire School as well. We've got, one of the challenges we're having is getting 3 or 4 or 5 bids. I mean, I'll go out to 5, 6, 7 contractors, and we're lucky if we get 2 bids back now. That's just the norm. So basically, we're gonna present to the ER board the 2 bids, and we'll decide which way we're gonna go with that. PCBs at Berkshire we had a Zoom meeting, a pretty productive Zoom meeting last week, and we're looking at some other options that we'll probably be able to share with you in the next meeting. Sheldon Elementary is going to have a pretty large project. They've got 2 steam boilers there, and this has been on the docket since I've been here, but we've been able to look along these things as we have in Berkshire. These boilers are old, and we've got to start updating. So we now are looking at 2 options. We were going to do a hydronic, which is hot water, and went out to 4 contractors, only 1 bid it, and they needed a little extra time because we had to get some numbers on air handlers. It was taking a little extra time, so we should have some numbers for that probably in the next week or so, and we should be able to move forward with that. Richford High School, we did another floor in the basement during February break. Yeah, February break. We had a door that was on the north side of the building that was about falling off the hinges, so we put a new door in there the other day. That went really well. I want to give you an update on the pellet system. I know that was a long drawn out affair for us. It was about 3.5 years, Morgan, but I can't be happier. There's been very few hiccups, and it's been producing really well. And I'm hoping that I can get some numbers to compare to what we did for propane bills versus what we did for pellets this year. I don't think we could have asked for a better year to have the pellet system in because it was a cold winter and it performed well. Really no hiccups. Enosburg High School, we didn't get a chance. That was the one school when we relit all the schools with LEDs. I didn't think we were going to be able to get it under the time frame, and kind of kicking myself now because I think we could have. But we're gonna do that this year. We're also doing an upgrade at the auditorium with some lighting as well. And Montgomery School, we're getting a price on getting the exterior painted. So basically, I work with the principals, I work with Morgan, I work with Michelle, I work with Don, just to try to prioritize and see where we're gonna go. I mean, there's no lack of what we wanna do, we just wanna make sure that we're putting money in the right places. And so, you know, we try to get together and kind of hash out how we're gonna go about getting this stuff done. And so far it's gone pretty smoothly, and hopefully this summer is no exception.
Vernon, in addition to all of that, I just want to thank you for not only getting this done, but getting the amount of grant money that you've gotten for the schools in our system. We never would have been able to accomplish the facilities projects without your work on that. I think you're at the $1 million mark.
Yeah, it's been,
I think we're really close to that.
it's been good. We've been really lucky.
Thank you for that. I do have one question about epoxy, because I don't love it's a pretty intense chemical. I know once it dries, it's inert, and it doesn't off-gas, but are there no greener alternatives to epoxy resin that provide that level of durability and maintenance?
The ones that we're using are the lowest velocity that we can.
Yeah.
Basically we have 3 different applications. At Richford High School, they have an application that they actually trowel on. I don't know if you guys have been in Richford High School, but the basement is
Not level.
Not level. You put a row of quarters, it's not going to stop, but it's the other end. So we researched a lot to try to find out what was the best application, and Beth is very happy, and it looks great, and it's holding up well. And then we have a epoxy pour with a fleck, and then we also have what we did over at Cold Hollow as well. there's no off-gassing. There's a very, very minute when they put it down,
Right.
but as far as off-gassing after the fact, not a problem. The only thing that I worried about was slippage. Done my research, there's nothing to show anymore with epoxy versus VC. I mean, quite frankly, Buck McAllister's floors look like water and they're probably more slippery than what the epoxy will be. So, and like I said, it's just a matter of having the bodies, making life a little bit easier for, we're really not overstaffed in these schools. We have enough to get it done. I think this will help the process out a little bit and hopefully make things a little easier for our help.
Okay, great, thanks. All right, so I know we have an executive session that we need to do. Just we'll quickly run through just board business. Any future agenda items that we should make a note of in the moment?
None that I know of. I don't think we're planning to meet again until August.
Right, so our next regularly scheduled meeting will be August 20th. Okay, great. So with that then, I'll make a motion to enter executive and then we'll let everyone leave. We'll do that by roll. Sarah?
Aye.
Miranda? Aye. Akua?
Aye.
Mary's an aye. All right, well, thank you all. If we don't see you again at a special meeting, have a great spring and summer. Let me know when you're ready and recording. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so we're out of executive session and I'll make a motion to instruct Lynn to act as per our discussion in executive. We'll do that by roll. Sarah?
Aye.
Miranda? Aye. Akua?
Aye.
And Mary is an aye. Any other business to tend to tonight?
No.
Okay, well, I'll make a motion to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, drive safely home in the snow.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.